All right, today Khemit and I are going to talk about why your wasted time wasn't wasted. So most people think that their time in the wrong line of work was a waste since they'll never get it back. In today's talk, we're going to discuss how that's flat out wrong and how it makes your personal and professional transformation possible. So with that, I'm going to kick it off and turn it over to Khemit to introduce himself to folks that may not know Khemit.
Hey, yeah, so thanks, Adam. Glad to be here again. This is best part of my week getting to talk to you about this stuff. Yeah, so I run a website, then a blog, also an online course called The Character Arc, which focuses on kind of using fiction to build a character around who it is that you want to be, and then move you measurably toward it in very concrete ways. Yeah, I think today's topic is a really useful one because a lot of people seem to have this perception that like whatever their past career was something that has no bearing on what they do in the future. Or even worse, sometimes people want to actually divorce themselves from it because it was so traumatic for them. They're like, I don't want to use that skill, even if it benefits me. And I think that there's a better way to approach it.
Yeah, yeah. And so, I work as a career coach, and so this topic comes up quite a bit, right? I talk to a lot of people that are dissatisfied with their careers, unhappy with their work lives, and they keep telling me, Adam, I feel like I'm wasting my time, right? I spent 5 years in sales and my heart's not in it. I don't love it. Or I've spent, 7 years in advertising or 10 years in project management in this line of work. And it's just doesn't feel like a good use of my time. And, that's kind of the starting point for the conversation. And what I always want to tell them is that it's not wasted time. There's a lot of value in this time. And I think if we look at our own experiences, yourself and mine, having gone through some career changes, well, in hindsight, we're able to see that actually it was that time that made our current lives possible. How would you say that's true for you, Kemet?
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously very, very true for me. And it's funny what you said. I mean, we talked about this before, but I find it interesting when, especially people in tech sales or sales in general, feel like they have a hard time transitioning because, in my experience, as an entrepreneur who's also worked in tech before and a lot of different other industries, sales is like the number one meta skill you can have. Like it really opens up the rest of the world for you. So it's something that translates very easily, I think, to other careers. But that's neither here nor there. For me personally, I think the biggest example of what we're talking about is the fact that, I spent 6 years in the Air Force. And so I was in intelligence and I was a linguist and analyst. And I did a lot of work that was, very unrelated to anything that I've ever done since, and not necessarily something that I wanted to continue doing, which is why I changed careers afterwards. And for a long time, I felt like, what I learned there was just a waste. I spent 6 years there doing work that I can't talk about and that I can't ever actually capitalize on in any real way. It's not work that I would do in any other career. But what I realized was that it wasn't just like a direct one-to-one correlation. Like I learned accounting and then I used the accounting. For me, it was more like I learned something very personal about how to interact in professional situations that I would never have gotten from anywhere else, really, at least to the degree that I got it. So, going on afterwards to work in tech, I think it made me so much more efficient and so much more conscientious to have had that background of actually, having to sit down and do a certain job for days and days on end with like very little reprieve. And as much as I didn't like it at the time, or after I was done, wanted to get, finished with it, it certainly helped me in my career like a lot.
Yeah, yeah, and I can certainly see how that's been true for me as well. So I found myself in two lines of work that weren't great fits for me, right? And when we talk about great fits, really what we're talking about is work that comes naturally to you, right? Like if you want to be really successful and really happy in your professional life, well, it makes a whole lot of sense to do work that you're really good at, right? Work that you almost feel like you were born to do. Now, on the flip side of that, when you're in the wrong line of work, well, oftentimes it means it's the wrong line of work because it's work that you're not especially good at, right? Your strengths are not aligned with that type of work. So
Yeah.
what that means is that you're doing tasks that you're not very well developed for. right? So for me in biotech, in clinical trial operations, it really requires a lot of attention to detail and a lot of a good organization, right? We're keeping track of a lot of patient data in spreadsheets, and there's just a lot of different moving parts. And if you miss a detail, that's a big deal. That's a problem. So you really have to get good at that.
Yeah.
Well, I was never good with that. Yeah, that's not one of my strong suits, right? Attention to detail and being well organized was never something that I was good at, but I learned it, right? And I picked up the skill and I got pretty good at it. And then I changed careers to sales. I was working in tech sales for about 5-6 years. And well, you better believe that those skills really came in handy. You know,
Mm-hmm.
organizing my customer data, the prospect data, spreadsheets, and you know, being spot on with those details when I'm emailing back and forth. You know,
Mm-hmm.
deals were kind of hanging in the balance based on these things.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's
yeah.
just one example that I can think of.
Yeah, no, I mean, I can say the same thing about some of my experiences, especially when I was working in tech, because again, like you, I was never one of the people who was just very conscientious. Like I sit down and I get all this work done on the computer for hours on end, but I had to get good at doing that. And I think that a lot of times, what people forget is that there's the intangible elements that tend to be the ones that are the most important. So like just because you didn't take away an actual skill that you think is useful now, it's like there are skills like other skills that you've developed that may not be as visible. Like you said, the ability to sit down and work hard, like the ability to manipulate spreadsheets. I'll tell you what my number one was, email, like efficiency with email. Even inside big tech companies, so many people are like not very good at email. Like they send
Yeah.
really long, funky emails. They don't give the information they're supposed to give. They don't really
Mm-hmm.
make it easy for the reader or for themselves. And like learning that skill while, at my time at my last job has made my life since then so much easier. And as I communicate with other entrepreneurs, I realize that some of them don't have that skill either. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's a good year I spent those years at, a large corporation where I can pick those things up.
Yeah. Yeah. No time is wasted. You're busy doing something all day, every day, and it's like going to the gym. You're flexing whatever those muscles are, and they're getting stronger, right? So that was true for me. The second time around, when I changed from clinical trial operations to sales, going into sales, I was a pretty shy, reserved person that didn't have a ton of experience working one-on-one with people. I had good communication skills and people skills, but that was kind of all up here. I hadn't really practiced it. So yeah, I was not really strong in that way. And then you fast forward 5 years later, very skilled at talking to people, very comfortable relating and knowing how to ask questions and how to listen and how to influence people in the right directions. So when I transitioned from sales to coaching, those were incredibly important skills and experiences. I couldn't be an effective coach if I hadn't had those skills. Not to mention, of course, whenever you're an entrepreneur and you're starting and running your own business, well, sales and marketing is crucial, right? So not only did it help me with the one-to-one coaching and the interpersonal skills, but the sales and marketing skills as well has been vital.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet, I've got a good example of this that some people may be familiar with, but you ever seen Aliens?
Yeah.
That's the second Aliens movie, right? And with Sigourney Weaver as Ripley.
Not the one where the alien pops out of the guy's chest.
Well, that happens in all of them because like the movie's just about that. But
Okay.
but but in the first movie had like a really iconic scene of that happening. The second movie, there's just tons of aliens because it's like more of like an action flick. But it's funny. The movie starts off with Sigourney Weaver, whose character like lost her flight license first, like for the incidents of the first movie, and so she had to learn to be like a forklift operator,
Oh
and
yeah.
forklift operator, and then like at the end of the movie, she's got to fight the queen alien with this huge forklift thing, and it's like it's basically like, oh man, my career actually was justified.
Oh
I never thought I'd actually use this skill, but boom,
yeah.
we defeated Queen Alien. So there's also
Cool.
that. I mean,
Yeah.
like it's obviously like a super dramatized and like exaggerated version of how that actually works. but there's a reason like those kind of things also stick with us, because you're like, you know what, it's true. The things you learn do have a bearing on the things you do in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I know that there are other movies where that's the case, and none of them are coming to mind. But this is definitely a thing that comes up in movies, and whenever it does, I get so excited. Like, yes, she got she got to run that forklift, but it worked out for her. Like, this is a good thing, you know. And,
Yeah,
and I think we like to see these things because it feels really good to recognize them in our own lives, right? Because
yeah.
that feeling of having wasted your time and wasted your life doing
Mhm,
something that you don't like, that you don't
mhm,
enjoy in the moment, it really sucks, right? Like,
mhm,
what is this concept of wasting your life?
mhm.
That's a really hard concept to sit with.
Yeah.
Time is precious, and we all grow up with this, idea that we're going to live these awesome, amazing lives, and then we're stuck in a cubicle in a dimly lit office, and we're like, oh God, this is what I'm doing with my life. Like 24 hours, this is it.
That's your classic. It's your classic Fight Club problem.
Yeah,
There's even that speech by Brad Pitt where he's like, uh, we were all told we'd be rock stars and and whatever, like, and we aren't, and we're pissed off about it. It's like kind of the whole point of the movie.
yeah, yeah. And what if you're kind of in that moment and you're in that cubicle in the dimly lit office with a micromanaging boss? What if you had the insight or had the knowledge that, you know what, I know this doesn't feel great right now, but I have to believe that it's part of some greater plan for me. I know that at some point in my life, I'm going to look back and see this as a valuable, important stepping stone. And maybe the fact that it was difficult, uncomfortable, unpleasant
Mhm.
is going to be a really important element in my ability to transform myself and change my career.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head, because I think that goes to that question of meaning, right? Like, you can actually suffer through any situation, not even just a bad work scenario, but any other tragedy that comes your way. um, because if you have something that is a higher goal that you set for yourself, so if you're working in the service of something else, I think it really changes the way you approach the work you're doing. But if you're just doing meaningless work and you don't see any path out of it, or you're doing it because you don't see any path out of it, then inevitably, it starts feeling bad. But like, I mean, I can attest to the immediate shift in your outlook, how things look when you move yourself over from thinking that your job is pointless and worthless and not getting you anywhere, to thinking that it's allowing you to subsist while you figure out what it is you want to do, and then also take measurable steps to get there, and knowing that you'll have the skills to do it when you're actually there, because you've done something before. You've made
Yeah.
yourself good at it.
Yeah, and so that can immediately allow you to suffer a whole lot less. If you know that, well, that takes away that element of the personal suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then there's this other idea of the value of the suffering in and of itself, right? So let's say you graduated from college and you got a job in finance and it pays well and you're kind of good at it. Your colleagues are okay. You're not really inspired, but you don't exactly dread going to work. You just you're okay with going through the motions.
Mm-hmm.
Now let's say that's you. If you're reasonably content, are you ever going to have the motivation or desire to reach for something greater, to try and reinvent yourself and aspire to your dream job, or do you think it will just kind of stay in that contented-ish place?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on the person, because some people really prize stability. Like, they just really want to spend all their time at their job. They don't really care if it's a fulfilling job. They find fulfillment in other parts of their life, as does everybody. But some people are more suited to just kind of that lifestyle or work style than others. But I think that there's also a large number of people, myself included, I would imagine you're in this group, who do feel this kind of, I don't want to call it like an ambition, but it's like a need for novelty, or a need for like a new kind of stimulus to really feel like there's something happening in your life. And I think everyone encounters this to some degree, in the course of their life. And I think it especially comes up when you're in those situations where you're bored. And I think boredom is just really like a lack of movement towards any measurable goal. And I think that you're right. I mean, a lot of people who get into those situations may feel very content, and they also feel like they don't have any right to be dissatisfied too. That's another thing that has kind of worked its way into our culture, is like, if you aren't happy with the amazing job that you have the good fortune to have, then something's wrong with you. And I don't think that's a fair assessment of what's happening at all. I think it's just that people really do need something to work towards, and they have to be excited about what they're going to get from what they're doing, or at least what it's going to do for the world or their family or themselves. So I don't think it's a trivial. I don't think it's a trivial, thing to tell people that it's okay to like move on from something that you're dissatisfied with. It's not, hubris or having feelings of like grandiosity about yourself. It's just the natural human inclination to like change and improve.
Right. Right. At the same time, to your point, if you're contented enough, you're not going to have a strong reason to change, and people wouldn't understand why you'd want to change either. So that kind of keeps you trapped a bit. And I also believe that, we all have this innate desire to have a meaningful life, to do meaningful work, to have a sense of purpose, right? And so if you're that contented-ish person that doesn't exactly draw a ton of meaning or purpose from their career, but you don't have a strong enough reason to do anything about it, well, you're kind of stuck, and you're never going to have that opportunity to, to shoot for the stars and to do something really amazing. Versus the person who's in a wrong line of work, that they're very unhappy, they dread going to the office each day, they're constantly feeling stressed out. Well, now all of a sudden you've got the fertile grounds for transformation, because it's like the buildup of tension gets greater and greater, to the point where they say, you know what, I am fed up, I can't do this anymore, like I need something more for my life. Yeah. And I'm speaking from experience here. After my previous career, and after having gone through two career changes, or two careers that didn't work, I was fed up. And when I told my parents, hey, mom and dad, I'm going to be making some big changes in the future, I need your support, they didn't try to talk me off the ledge. They're like, they saw my suffering, and they totally agreed with my reasoning and my assessment. Mm-hmm. And so I did too. For me, it was like, okay, so I'm about to take a big risk and really go for something that other people might think I'm crazy for. And I know I'm going to catch some flack from people for leaving a good job and a good career, but I don't care. I feel personally very justified in doing this, because the pain is so great that whatever risk is involved is worth it. And because of that, I've been able to make this change, and thank God, because I am feeling so much better as a result. My work life and my life in general is just so much better, because I've found work that does come naturally to me, that I do enjoy, that is aligned with my skills, my interests, my values, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, man, I think it's great. I'm inspired by your story as well. Like, it's funny. I look at what you're doing, and you're very aligned towards making people's lives better, which I think is, at the end of the day, any real reasonable goal is going to include a kernel of that to some degree. But I think there's actually a quote. I can't remember who it's by. I think it was either Joseph Campbell or Young, where they were saying that the people who have the hardest time in life are people who don't have either the inclination towards exploration of these kind of ideas. They don't have that, and they don't have anyone who introduces them to it. Because I think there's a lot of people who don't ever hear about this kind of talk. It's certainly not a mainstream topic conversation. Why you should leave the job that makes you successful. And I think it's a critically important thing to discuss. And I actually have another example from what we were talking about with regards to how you can even find dissatisfaction in like things that are doing really well for you financially or in other areas. I actually wrote an article that is on my website called How to Stay Out of the Money Trap pretty recently. And it was talking about exactly that, where it was saying you can't confuse the tool, which is money, for the thing that the tool will provide, which is happiness, right? Even though people conflate those two together all the time. But there's this movie with Anthony Hopkins called The Edge. It's got Alec Baldwin. And Anthony Hopkins plays this billionaire who is on vacation with his wife and some people from his work out in Alaska, right? And yada yada yada. They get in a big plane crash out in the woods, and he's had
Oh,
this,
yeah.
he had this hobby
Oh,
about.
really?
Yeah, have you seen that?
Uh-huh.
Oh yeah, man, it's a fantastic movie. But he's got all this. He's had a hobby of like survival for most of his life. And he's reading books about it and kind of developing all these skills. And then when they're in that situation, he has to use all of them. But the more important part of the movie is that you really see him come alive. And I think this is true. You really see him like kind of find himself in this moment of privation where, he lives a very pampered life. He has all this money. He has, everything anyone could ask for, but he doesn't have that thing that we all need, which is like some sort of a goal and some sort of a use. And as soon as he finds that in himself, he kind of transforms as a character. It's a really good movie.
Yeah, awesome. I kind of want to check that out again.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, so in wrapping up here, if you're watching this and you're finding that you're identifying with some of the things we're talking about, maybe you're in a contented-ish place, or maybe you're just really unhappy and you're dreading going to work each day. Just consider the value of these experiences, right? And know that at some point, hopefully you'll commit to positive change and finding a better line of work that suits you better, so you can ultimately have a greater sense of meaning and purpose. But let's just suppose that you do that someday, right? Well, if you do, you will look back on this time where you are right now in your cubicle or wherever you are, and you're going to be appreciative. You're going to feel grateful in the same ways that Khemit and I are grateful for some of our past lives in work. And you're going to see that if it wasn't for those crappy experiences, you wouldn't be where you are today. And thank God that you did have those experiences, because where you are today in the future is really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, it's important to remember, man. I think, too often we have this like myopic view of where we are in the moment. And it's really important to take the long view about these kind of things. It's like, if you look at who you are as not just yourself, but everybody that you're going to be in the future, you have to do things that are working in favor of for that person, And so I think one of the things we work on in my course is actually taking all of the traits and actions that you see in movies or you see in real life that inspire you, and building them into kind of a coherent character, almost like a person that you keep in the back of your head who has all those traits, and is basically just a reminder for you. So that anytime you find yourself in a situation where you want to take a risk, or you want to do something that's maybe a little bit outside the box, you can look to that character to see if, what would they do? It's almost like an example. And I think it's good because it takes the onus off of you as a person, as an individual, and it puts it kind of onto this mythical figure that you've created for yourself, who is unerring. Nobody really ever makes the mistake of saying what the wrong thing to do is if asked, like, what should you do? If you ask people like, hey, what would you do if you were going to follow your dreams? They can always tell you. Or
Right.
if you were to follow what it is that you really want to be doing in the world, they know the answer immediately, but it's doing it that's the hard part. So, but I think it's one of those things to think about, and that can really be helpful.
Awesome. All right, great. Well, let's end on that note. Khemit, thanks again. I thought this was a really good discussion again on why your wasted time was not wasted. So hopefully this was interesting to everybody that is checking this out, and tune in for the next one. We're going to be doing these on a weekly basis.
Yep. Great talking to you too, Adam, as always.